Okay, there we go. So hi, everybody. Thanks again so much for joining. My name is Sydney Hobart. I'm a community health improvement specialist with Allina Health and the coordinator for Change to Chill, which we're going to be talking about today. I also just want to pass it to my colleague Khadija to introduce herself as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khadija Cooper. I'm the education director at the Annex Teen Clinic, and I'm here to just talk about the partnership that we had with Change the Chill.
Awesome. Thanks, Khadija. And for folks who are just joining, if you want to, like we have on the screen here, I'll resume my share. In the chat, if you haven't already, please feel free to just say your name, where you work, and your role, just so we have a sense of kind of who's in this space today. But we do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, I just want to tell you a little bit about Allina Health as we're kind of launching into this overview of our program, Change to Chill. I'm sure folks are familiar, but Allina is a large healthcare system that serves primarily central Minnesota and also a bit of western Wisconsin as well. So just a little bit of grounding there in terms of who we are. And then also in terms of kind of the work that my department does and the work that I help to support within Allina, I work in our community benefit and engagement department. So one of the largest tasks for that department is to complete our community health needs assessment once every 3 years. So essentially this is a process in which we go out in the community and we really want to gather feedback and information from our community members about what the emergent health needs are. Probably unsurprising to everybody in this space since you showed up, mental health continues to rise to the surface. I think even pre-COVID, but especially after COVID-19, there's a lot of concern around mental health and well-being within our communities and primarily amongst our youth. So from that has led to the creation of Change to Chill, which we're going to be talking about today. So a little bit on this slide in terms of what Change to Chill is. Primarily, we are a free online educational resource. Our website is changetochill.org. So that's where you can find all of our activities, handouts, videos, etc., some of which we'll walk through today. But essentially everything that we've created is designed to be by and for teens. But what we like to say is that all can benefit from our tools and resources as well. So I know many of you in the room today are school staff. So as we walk through, some of the things to be thinking about is potentially how you could utilize these resources and tools with your students. But also too, I think that could spark a lot of larger conversation amongst staff, and even with parents and families in your school as well. So the primary focus of Change to Chill is to help youth identify their stressors and build resiliency. So we do a lot on the education side in terms of what is mental health and well-being, what do those things mean, why are they important, what are my specific signs and symptoms that I may be feeling stressed or overwhelmed, to then shifting to that resiliency and skill building piece on how do I then manage any stress or anxiety that I may be experiencing. So those are the sort of the two sides of our website. We are a prevention-based initiative, so this is not a tier 2, tier 3 intervention by any means, but really helping again to do a lot of that education and sort of skill building with youth to prevent any worsening mental health outcomes happening. And then just the last thing that I like to note here for all of you educators in the room, all of our resources and tools are linked to national health and physical education standards as well. And in terms of what we do, I know I've talked a little bit about the website already. We do a lot of community trainings and presentations, both in person and online with the onset of the pandemic, sort of like what we're doing here today. And then we do also have a pretty extensive Change to Chill school program. So that's something that's kind of under construction right now. We're in the midst of strategic planning. But in the past, essentially what that has looked like is providing schools across our Allina Health service area with funding and support to create what we call a chill zone, just a dedicated calm down room or reset room in a school building to help students when they are experiencing things like stress or anxiety throughout the day, as just a place to go to kind of do some self-regulation before returning to the classroom. Other components of that partnership have included the second piece here, which we call our Chill Champion program. So that's where 2 students from each school that we are in partnership with that year, they come and do a summer internship with us. And so sort of learn kind of what Change to Chill is. And we really empower them with the knowledge and the skills that then become champions for the program once the school year starts. So that's a little bit more about what we do. I also just want to show the homepage here for those that have not been to changetochill.org. This is what you'll be met with when you do go. This is just kind of what it looks like. I want to point out up at the top here, you can see sort of in that blue banner, an effort that we did in the last year was to translate all of our resources into Spanish as well. We believe that language should not be a barrier to access for any of our tools and resources. So that's an ongoing effort of ours to continue to make everything that we have accessible to those who speak Spanish in particular. And then we've also got some efforts going underway as well for Somali speakers too. So just a little bit there. I'm just going to breeze over this one. I know I talked a lot about this already, but in terms of what that school partnership has looked like in the past, here are all of the different components there. And really, I think with the onset of the pandemic and the ways in which the school environment has changed in the past several years, we're doing a lot of critical thinking and conversation moving forward about how we can better support schools given all of the change that has happened. So there will be more to come in the next few years about what school partnership looks like, and maybe involving some of you as well. So that was a super quick overview of kind of who Change to Chill is and what we do. I also just wanted to share a couple of kind of overarching resources on our educational side of the website, and then we'll launch into the more identity specific pieces that we're really here to focus on today. So in terms of, like I said, that education side and really helping you to understand what is stress, what is anxiety, what's that brain-body connection. So if I am feeling stressed or overwhelmed, do I notice that maybe my stomach hurts, or maybe I'm fidgeting a lot, or are there other physical symptoms that I'm noticing that help to alert me that I am feeling overwhelmed or anxious, for example. So that's sort of what this page looks like. I think this is a really good introductory one to point youth to, and some of the conversations, or a way to start to initiate some of those conversations with your students. Further down on that page, this is also kind of part of our efforts to broaden this conversation as well. We talked in the past a lot about the sort of day-to-day stressors on Change to Chill, but as part of this larger equity work that we're doing, and we'll talk more about later on in the presentation, we also wanted to acknowledge that there are more than just the day-to-day stressors, right? There are really different kinds of stress, all the way from happy or positive or eustress, right, to more traumatic stressors as well. So just acknowledging, I think that it's a spectrum, I think has been really helpful in helping us to change the way we present the information and have the conversation, and just kind of making students aware of that spectrum too. We also have a lot of information on stigma as well. I wanted to acknowledge this too ahead of our conversation related to our equity specific resources, just acknowledging that there is still a lot of mental health stigma, even with, I think, the pandemic, and maybe there was a lot more conversation about mental health and well-being generally, and also there's still a lot of stigma associated with help seeking in particular. So probably does not come to a surprise to anybody here in this room, but just I think something that's important to touch on and think through, especially when we're talking about students with more marginalized identities in particular. So we speak a little bit about that on Change to Chill, and really try to provide some tools in the form of conversation starters about kind of how do you introduce a conversation about stigma, or what does it mean to help reduce stigma and talk about mental health and well-being? How can you play a role in that? The you being either teens and students themselves, or you all as sort of the help giving professionals in their lives. So just wanted to note that there. And so now we'll shift gears a little bit. I wanted to kind of frame up this conversation by talking about our partnership with Hennepin County and some amazing community partners, including Khadijah at the Annex Teen Clinic and other folks as well. So just do a little bit of grounding on kind of what this partnership has looked like for us over the past 2 years, and then we'll get into what we've been able to produce through this partnership. Okay, so this really started in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic. Hennepin County reached out to us with some CARES Act federal funding, really around, how are we going to engage, again, primarily marginalized communities in health and well-being work. So with our work at Change to Chill and focusing specifically on youth, how can we really expand that and meet the youth that are really, struggling, I think, the most, both with COVID-19 and then I think in particular here in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd and just sort of those compounding events that were happening, and recognizing that those who are feeling it the most were those who identify as BIPOC and LGBTQ in particular. So that was sort of the impetus behind this work. And you can see there on the screen, these are the communities that we decided to focus on in these first 2 phases of work. And also this work is iterative and ongoing. And so the more we engage in it, I think the more far reaching it can be. But just as a start, this was really the shift for us and the communities in which we wanted to focus. So in terms of our proposed partnership aims, it was really for us a call to review and adapt many of our existing resources and or create new resources where there were gaps to reflect the unique stressors and community ways of coping, specifically in those communities that we had outlined. So again, those are youth who identify as Black or African American, Hispanic or Latinx, Native or Indigenous, and or LGBTQ. So just acknowledging that there was a lot of gap areas on our end, on our website. We didn't have a lot of information that spoke to those communities specifically and their unique experiences with stress and anxiety in particular. So how do we fill those gaps, and how do we do that in partnership with community who either identify as and or are serving youth who do identify in those ways? So a lot of that looked like creating new culturally responsive content, doing the website translation that I referenced earlier, having more mental well-being conversations and webinars, both with youth themselves, but especially with parents and families, creating new videos, and then also getting it out to schools and other youth serving organizations as well. So once we create the thing, right, how do we then promote it and equip folks out in the community to utilize these tools and resources with youth that they serve? So phase 1 of this work was really that mental health and well-being conversations and webinars. So you can see here, these are 4 different slides from 4 of the different webinars that we had, one with each specific community. So there was one that was really focusing on mental well-being conversations within the Black and African American community, Latinx community, Native and Indigenous, and LGBTQ as well. Really with the goal of just starting the conversation. And this was done in a virtual setting with just being during the pandemic. And so I think there were a lot of challenges with that. And so I think too, also a lot of learnings from these webinars, but I think really helpful on our end and hopefully on the community side as well, as just a way to get the conversation going about what mental health and well-being look like in each of these communities specifically, and how do we fill any gaps in services that might be needed in particular. So in terms of those learnings, right, we heard things that we were aware of, and also, just hearing it again, I think from community made it even stronger of a call, right? So the need for more representation, I think in our materials, but also largely in the work that we do. More teen voices in the written content that we create as well. So again, Change to Chill was designed to be by and for teens. So how do we continue to create opportunities for youth to be involved in every step of the process, right? Both from the development of content all the way to implementation and evaluation of that rollout as well. More interactive content. So there are a couple of elements on the website, such as the stress quiz, which I reference here, but how do we make it a little bit more approachable and accessible? We have a lot of web pages that have a lot of information, but how do we make it a little bit more digestible for youth in particular, perhaps through adding more of that interactive content? There was more of a need too around clarity in terms of who this website and who these resources are for. Are they by and for teens? Are they by and for educators, or somewhere in the middle? So I think some of that we're still working toward as well. And then really thinking through different modes of communication as well. And then I will say for the webinars too, we talked about the challenges of reaching people virtually. So that was a big learning also, that, I think it's great that we had those conversations. And is there a way that we can make the information a little bit more accessible for people at any time, right? So how do we create something on the website that they can come to at any point in time, rather than just the 1 hour well-being conversation we were having, for example. So a little bit on what we learned in phase 1 of this work. And then from there, in sort of the phase that I think we're still in, and I hesitate to call it a phase even, I think that this is just how we're going to be approaching our work moving forward, is really this content co-creation piece. So a lot of this is about engaging community partners, community leaders, people who identify in these ways, and also serve youth who identify in these ways, really sharing power with them, sharing the mic, and coming up with resources and tools together. So a lot of that has been relationship building with folks like Khadija, and some of the other organizations listed on this slide here. But really, I think that's been the greatest product of this work, is establishing these really authentic relationships with our community partners and doing the work together. So in doing that, I'm going to pass the mic to Khadija.
Thank you. So I'll just give you a quick overview of the Annex Teen Clinic. So we are located in Robbinsdale, and we really have like 2 functions. We have clinical services and educational services. So all of our clinical services are for young people up until through their 25th year. And we're really focused on sexual health and reproductive services for many reasons, but primarily one, all of the services that we provide in the clinic are protected under the minors consent law, which is basically says that if a young person wants to access our services, they do not need parental consent to do so. And what we know is that really eliminates barriers for young people getting the care that they need. All of our services are confidential, non-judgmental, and low cost or no cost. We also support young people in getting signed up for a program called MFPP, which will help support maybe like get them getting an IUD or on a birth control method where they wouldn't have to worry about the cost. So all of our services, like you see on the screen here, pregnancy testing, with all options counseling, STI testing, birth control, as well. So the other thing that we do is educational services, which is the department I work in. So we do education in the classroom. We do parent education, which I'll touch on a little bit more later. We do a ton of community outreach. And so the community outreach will be the annex being represented at a community event or a community fair. We also do community and outreach testing. So we do testing at schools, we do testing in community sites where there's a need, and bringing the service to them is just a way to lower barriers to getting the information they need to be healthy. And then all of our educational services are evidence-based or informed, fact-based, relevant, and culturally informed as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Khadija. We also just wanted to touch on briefly too, and I'll sort of tee it up here, and then Khadija and Kathy too, if there's anything that you want to add. The Health Mentor Program through Better Together Hennepin. So I bring this up both because, Khadija and folks at the Annex are really involved in this part of the education piece that she referenced. So doing a lot of this in-person, one-to-one connection with students. And we've really leaned on health mentors in this process, as well as we've been developing new content and piloting it, rolling it out to youth in particular. So I don't know, Khadija, if there's anything you want to add here about kind of what that program is or what it looks like.
Absolutely. So currently we have 5 health mentors. We're located in Brooklyn Center High School, both Robbinsdale High Schools, Cooper and Armstrong, and then Fair Downtown. And then we have a community health mentor that really supports all of those different locations as well. So the part of the health mentor model that I love is that this is an educator who is staffed at the Annex but housed in a school full time. So young people have access to this person anytime that they're at school to provide them with additional support around sexual health, relationships, communications, etc. So just to kind of touch really quickly on the different the different points of the model. So classroom education is the biggest at the base of the health mentor model. So we're providing evidence-based sex ed curriculum in the high schools in their health classes, and then small groups. So every health mentor has a youth leadership council, and each youth leadership council really looks different depending on the school that they're at. And then the one-on-one component. So the one-on-one component, the evidence-based approach that we use is motivational interviewing. So it's not therapy. We're not therapists. We're not counselors in that way. But what we are doing is providing that one-on-one education and support. And then on the side there, you can kind of see it says safe and supportive environment. So we also call that systems work. And so systems work really is allowing the young people to have some stake and some say of like what's going on in your school, what needs to be changed, or the health mentor noticing maybe a gap in services or something, and using within their job to provide something for the school that maybe was missing. So for example, at one of the high schools, there was an increased need to be able to provide pregnancy tests and emergency contraception. So the health mentors were like, we need to figure out if there's a way that we can do this to eliminate barriers, increase access and support and education around these two things. So they work with the Annex medical staff, they work with the school administration, and now in the two Robbinsdale high schools, we're able to administer pregnancy tests and emergency contraception when it's appropriate. And what we found out is that when a young person is able to take a pregnancy test and have access to an educator to do all options counseling, that's really helping that young person make the decision that's best for them. And, you know, taking a pregnancy test can feel really scary. It can have a lot of anxiety. So to have that support right there in the school is so helpful. We've even heard from some students at Brooklyn Center in past years that they're like, I come to school because I'm able to talk to my health mentor about this topic. So having that additional support in the school has been really helpful. And helpful for the staff as well, because staff members are like, I'm a great math teacher, but I'm a great science teacher, but I'm not a sexuality educator. I have great relationships with my students and they're asking me these questions and I don't necessarily know how to navigate that. And so them having a health mentor is be like, oh, you have a question about sex or relationships, there's a person in the school that I can refer you to talk to one-on-one.
Awesome. Thanks for that additional context, Khadijah. And again, I wanted to reference this one because I think the Health Mentor program has been, like Khadijah said, really monumental in these schools where those mentors are in the sexual health space. And also, you know, part of my partnership and Khadijah's partnership together, right, is how do we also bring mental health and well-being conversations into that space? So it has been, I think, mutually beneficial in that way, in that we've learned a ton from the Annex about how they do their work and what's working well, while also thinking through together, what does it look like to introduce mental health and well-being into this model that already is really successful, right? And so they provided us a ton of help and support in this work as well. So just wanted to give that shout out here. Okay, and as we shift gears to talk about, you know, what we've been able to produce in partnership together, and really these equity specific focus, specific resources that we want to focus on today. Sorry, I just wanted to take a moment, and if folks want to come off mute quickly or put in the chat, sort of what does inclusion and belonging look like in your school or in the community organization in which you work? Just to kind of get us thinking about the importance of this work and kind of things that you're already doing as we think through some resources that we've developed that may help to support those efforts. So again, feel free to put things in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute and share aloud. Youth voice and decision making. Thank you for that. Meeting youth and families where they're at, hearing their needs and advocating for them. Yes, thank you for that, Gina. Okay, Maybe one more. What does inclusion and belonging look like in your school or community organization? Youth leading community projects within the school. Yeah. So I think all of you are saying really similar things, right? And also things that we're trying to do with this partnership as well, in addition to the work that the Annex does on a regular basis, right? Really bringing youth into the conversation. Generally, we believe that youth know what they need. So how do we just empower them to do that work and provide them the support that they need to do it? So thank you all for raising that, and feel free to keep throwing things in the chat as well. So in terms of what that has looked like for our partnership, really it's all kind of culminated under this big umbrella that I'm calling stress and identity. So for us, this has really been the acknowledgement within Change to Chill that stress impacts us differently based on the different identities that we have, right? So as I mentioned before, we talked a lot about kind of the day-to-day stressors and from, I think, a really singular lens. But in doing this work, we've really broadened it and acknowledged that youth who identify as people of color and or youth who identify as LGBTQ, right? They're going to have different experiences, and that includes their experiences with mental health and well-being, right? So how do we, one, acknowledge those differences, and two, then provide resources, tools, and support for those different experiences, right? So that's really been the goal of this work. And I think also too, it's a part of Change to Chill's work in helping teens to form a better understanding of what their sense of identity is and to feel positive and accepting of themselves, right? That's a huge part of mental health and well-being too. And just acknowledging that being a teenager is when all of this change is happening, right? You're trying to figure out who you are. You're juggling so many different things. And so for us, how do we support you in that space? And no matter what your identity is, but also because of what your identity is, how can we provide specific support that you may need because of that experience? So in terms of the overarching resources, and here I'm just going to be showing kind of a series of screenshots, both from our website and also the different tools that we've created. But so we start at the top with kind of what is identity. So this has been really new content and a really new direction for us. But again, as part of that goal of helping teens to understand what identity is, helping them to reflect on their own identities and experiences, and then sort of making that shift or, bridging that gap to then what is my specific experience with mental health and well-being, and how might that be connected with my own identity and my specific experience. So just doing a little bit of education around what identity is, getting that reflection happening with tools like this one. So this is a worksheet that we created also in partnership with folks like the Annex to really do a lot of that identity education piece and reflection, right? So acknowledging that there are personal identities, so things that I get to choose about myself, like my hobbies, for example, my favorite things, my talents or my skills, the things that are, a little bit more fun, I think. And then also the social identity piece, right? So things like race, gender, ethnicity, right? Things that also come with, unique experiences out in the world as well because of how I present myself in that way. We also in this worksheet talk about invisible identities. So what are the things that people may assume about me or things that I don't want to share about myself related to these different aspects of my identity as well. So just one tool, I think, to help youth kind of get the wheels turning on what identity is and what their experiences are related to each of these different pieces of themselves. We also in this section talk a lot about intersectionality. So both what that means and its importance when we're talking about mental health and well-being. So what does it mean that I'm a person of color and I'm also a woman and maybe I also identify as queer, right? How does that change my experience just in general, right? But also when we're talking about mental health and well-being, how my stressors look different from my peer who just identifies as a person of color and maybe also a queer person too, right? So just kind of recognizing that, we all have these overlapping identities, right? We're not just one thing or the other, and sort of thinking through how that impacts the way we move through the world as well. And then we also talk a lot about kind of sharing your identity. So we start with kind of what is identity, what is your identity, what does it look like to reflect on those things or to be learning these things about yourself, and also what does it mean to either share or maybe not share that information with another person, and the stress that may come with that, right? So too, I want to invite Khadijah to kind of jump in here for anything that you might want to reshare related to this concept of kind of the stress that comes with sharing pieces of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's really important that Change the Chill has this opportunity to really talk about the intersections of our identity, and I think we're young people, especially when we think about coming out. I think sometimes people think like, well, we live in a world that's like really accepting now, and like we see like everybody's participating in Pride and everything's rainbow. And I think for young people who are figuring out their identity and like kind of living in this, it doesn't necessarily always feel like that in their day-to-day life. So I think having a section that really validates that, like, yeah, like coming out can be really complicated for young people in their family unit, within their schools, within their friendship group, and that is not always something that's like, okay, like I came out, like everybody's great, like things are fine, like life goes on. And so I think it's like that validation that's the young people who are experiencing that get to see that is super important, because at this age developmentally, having their feelings validated and like when they maybe feel like I'm not the majority is really important as far as their mental health and mental well-being and stress. So I think it's really important that it is in here. And another part of the identity piece when we're pointing young people to this is like, hey, there's this section too, because sometimes we gloss over that part when we're thinking about young people sharing who they are. And then also letting young people know that they don't have to. They get to like share their parts of their identity that they want to, and nobody just has automatic access to that information.
Awesome, thank you. So with that, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about our LGBTQ resources specifically. So Khadijah, I'm going to hand it over to you here as well.
Great. So when creating these resources with my colleague who no longer works at the Annex here, but we really thought of like, what are young people saying that they need support with around this topic, mental health, mental well-being, and making sure that we are really approaching this with like a positive light. We hear the unfortunate stories, but we wanted to really have this balance of like, this is like the reality, and yet like you in your identity still deserve to have good mental health. You still deserve to have support and love and all of these things. So we have on this portion like affirmation cards, right? Just a little affirmation cards like you see at the bottom, love is love. And then also like a little bit of like figuring out yourself, right? As young people are growing up, this is developmentally a time in their life where they're figuring out their identity. And this is something like all young people are doing, right? But I think especially for young people who identify as LGBTQ, there is a heightened awareness to figuring out their identity as well. So we definitely wanted to highlight that part as well. And then I think when we think about young people who identify as LGBTQ, having a portion that's like finding your people. All young people need support, but especially when LGBTQ youth are like figuring out their identity, it is especially a safety factor for this community to find who are their safe people in their school, community, and home as well. Yeah, so just some other things that we created. So obviously, resources is really important. Um, I think we are really lucky in the Twin Cities. We have a plethora of resources that we can provide to young people, as well as education and resources for adults. As someone who does the majority of parent education at the Annex, what I've noticed is that parents like are really curious about gender. My young person, for example, I don't like told me their pronouns are they, them. Like I don't understand. And like they really have this growth edge. So it's really nice to have an additional resource to also point parents and caregivers to, and educators as well. about, like finding that information out for themselves. And at the end of the day, what is really important for this community is that they have support from someone. So there is like coming out and like being stressed out at the bottom there on the right hand side. And then there's also just like some really positive things that we put on here as well, like the affirmation cards. And I think the next slide shows the gender. Yep. So the gender unicorn, again, this is just for young people to reflect. This is a good educational tool for adults who are really trying to kind of ground themselves in this information that maybe they haven't heard in the past. I think, self-guided imagery and like really having young people have that opportunity to have like a worksheet to be like, okay, like this, like I'm coming out, like what are some things I should consider? How do I go about this in a safe way and making sure that I'm supportive as well. So I think all of these tools can be really helpful for young people who identify as LGBTQ as they're navigating, figuring out who they are and stress and all the other things that young people are faced with today.
Awesome. Thanks, Khadijah. Yeah, so as she underscored here too, a lot of resources that are for youth specifically to utilize, and also a lot of educational resources for you all as professionals and parents and families too, right? We recognize that, there's a lot of learning that we all could be doing, right, on all of these different things. And so in order to have these kinds of conversations with youth, you kind of got to know the terms and the words to use, right? So we want to help support you in some of that journey also. And I think just in general, some good resources that, maybe they don't need to do with you, but just as a tool of like, here's something that could be helpful to you. I know where to point you for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of our goal here. Awesome. So also as part of this work, as I said, we focused primarily on youth who identify as BIPOC as well. So we have all that whole page of, resources for LGBTQ youth. And then we also wanted to create tools and resources for youth who identify as people of color. I have this under construction emblem on here just for transparency's sake that this is work that we did. And also with it being ongoing and iterative, right? We continue to learn, what's working and what's not working and how we can pivot and adjust depending on what we hear from community. So this was a page that was previously on the website and we've sort of taken down to kind of do some additional work on. And that's also with some feedback that's been provided by Khadijah and other folks at the Annex. But this was the start for us in terms of how do we kind of capture that unique experience of a BIPOC student and their specific experiences with mental health and well-being. And we identified, obviously, right, discrimination and racism being two things that really help or don't help, but to bog down that mental health and well-being, right? So again, how do we acknowledge that the experience is different? And then how do we also provide some tips or some tools to help manage or mitigate any stresses that might be coming from either or both of these experiences for youth of color? So this was just sort of the start of what these pages look like, and there will be sort of different resources to come in the future and a little bit different of a framing. So more to come on what this will look like. But again, kind of a transparently, right, just wanted to show that we're learning too, right? And so as we engage in this work, I think just really continuing to be open and collaborative with our community partners and youth themselves to hear, what's helpful and what's not. So sort of a first pass at what this all will look like. And Khadijah too, if there's anything that you wanted to add in the way of the feedback that you all provided and how we're thinking about the framing differently moving forward.
Yeah, I think I was really I really appreciated Sydney bringing this to me and my team and being like, hey, just like click through this portion of the website and give your honest feedback. And I think for me, I think like approaching this topic, especially around, Black and African American young people, I just think like imposter syndrome and internalized oppression and racial battle fatigue, it feels very heavy for me even as an adult. So thinking about that for young people, I don't know if that's how they would feel if they left this page and being like, wow, like it's like heavy. And I do also want to say like the person they partnered with to do this is a great organization. I've done a lot of some of their like healing work, and I think the context that's really important is that the folks they partner with don't necessarily like intersect with young people. These are the things that they've heard in their community, in our community, that Black and Brown folks are experiencing, which is a real and true thing. So I don't want to just do away with the information that they provided. But I think for me as a youth worker, I just would like to see these things addressed in a way that doesn't put the onus on the young person, that puts the onus on the system, because it's the system that kind of like trickles down, that can provide more stress and anxiety, for example, for young people who are Black and African American. So I really think it's important to talk about these intersections of identity as referring to like mental health and stress. I think it's a complicated thing to kind of wrap our whole head around as we think about how do we want to talk to Black and Brown young people who are experiencing a lot of trauma, who are seeing a lot of trauma in their community. But when they leave Change the Chill website, they feel good about their identity. They feel good about what they have to give to the world, etc. And I think for me, my gut reaction, not only as an educator, a community member, and also a parent, I just would be like, oh, how would my child feel if they left this website? If they're like, I'm stressed, and now I'm like, oh no, I do have imposter syndrome or internalized or racial battle fatigue, and it feels like more of carrying a boulder uphill. And I want them to feel like, okay, I can relieve the boulder even if I'm still traveling uphill. So I really appreciate the partnership with Sydney to be like, give us your honest opinion, don't hold anything back, and they truly meant it. And because of that, there's going to be like something like really great for our young people that comes out of this. But it's intentional, and Allina Health has been really intentional about the work that they're doing. So
Awesome. Thank you, Khadija. And yeah, like I said, I bring this up because, again, just want to underscore that this is hard work, right? And we stumble along the way, but we have, the benefit of really amazing, honest community partners who are helping us do this work. And so just as kind of a thought exercise for you all too, as you're thinking about how to engage in these kinds of conversations, the framing of it is really important, and it's okay to stumble along the way as well. So just a really tangible, I think, example of that, while also saying, these are things that we're actively working on and will be coming forward in the next year. So just keep an eye out for that, but also in terms of the approach and how you do the work, right? We've learned so much from the Annex and folks too about how to frame these kinds of conversations and make them more, strengths-based and asset-based and resiliency focused and forward, right? Because that's a really important part of the conversation as well. So more to come on sort of what these resources will look like. Additionally, we've been doing a lot of work specific to Latinx and Hispanic youth as well. So this is a page that will be coming forth soon too. Specifically speaking, I think primarily to staff, school staff, and other youth serving professionals. This was work that we did in partnership with a school counselor at El Colegio High School. So serving primarily and almost exclusively, I think, Latinx youth speaking Spanish. So again, just sort of some tips or some principles on how to engage these youth in particular, and things to be aware of. So again, acknowledging that there are resources that we provide youth to use and be aware of themselves, and also resources for you all to be aware of and thinking through as you're engaging youth in these certain kinds of conversations about mental health and well-being. So more to come there. The newest page, which should be out by the end of the year. The other thing about this work is that it takes a lot of time, right? And we pivot a lot and we flex a lot. And so it will be coming soon, is our newest page for Native and Indigenous youth. So much of this work has been done in partnership with Indigenous Peoples Task Force, which is a community organization based here in the Twin Cities, serving Indigenous and Native folks primarily in the metro area, but then also providing some support to greater Minnesota as well. They have done some really amazing work in the education space and sort of the reclaiming of traditional medicines and cultural practices, all related to health and well-being, right? So have also been a really amazing partner in this work as we're thinking about how to provide resources and support specific to Native and Indigenous youth. So there will be more to come on this page in the next month or so, really, again, acknowledging that there are certain cultural practices and teachings specific to this community that can be really helpful for health and well-being. So as sort of a preview, oh, sorry, I just wanted to play this quick video, something that we're really excited about on this page. Oh, actually, the video is not enabled. Okay, so I will send this out after the fact. It will be included in the slides. My apologies for that. But one of the things that will be included on that new page is actually 4 youth-created videos. Each one focuses on a different sacred medicine within Native and Indigenous communities. So those medicines being tobacco, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. So in each one, they talk about kind of what the medicine is and its cultural significance, and then also the ways in which they utilize that medicine for their health and well-being. What's really amazing about these videos is that the youth created them themselves. And really, that's kind of the first time that we'll be featuring something like that on Change to Chill. So as you all have stated, that inclusion and belonging means bringing youth forward. This is one way that we're doing that with this new content. So really excited to be able to share those with you. Apologies that I'm not able to today, but we will send that out afterward. So more to come on that page. And then just briefly, so those are the equity-related resources that we already have either live on the website or will be coming soon for each of those specific communities of focus, but also just wanted to touch on some other resources that we have for you all, being supportive adults in schools and communities. So first, I'll give it to Khadijah here.
Thank you. So the programs that we have for caregivers and adults with our parent education, it's really using the foundation of an approach called It's That Easy. It was developed here in Minnesota. And so we also, like when we talk about what we talk about with parents is giving them the tips and the tools on how to communicate with their young people in their lives around whatever topic we're covering that night. And so we also have a Let's Talk, which is an adult and child workshop together. And so that workshop again is about how as a family or a family unit can we all communicate better, especially around sensitive things, right? Because the parents want to provide information, advice, and young people want to provide, usually around adolescence, nothing, right? They don't want to talk to us about anything. So how can we provide them with like a space that's fun and interactive, to have this time of like parent-child connectedness? And we're really focusing on parents who are parenting middle and high school age, right? Right in that like peak start of puberty and in that adolescence as they're developing and finding their own identity, and in that time where they're just pulling away from parents, which is appropriate and developmentally like where they're at. And so the topics that we cover is It's That Easy, Parents as Sexuality Educators. That is a strong value that we have at the Annex, that parents are the primary sexuality educators for the young people in their life. We talk to parents about how to talk to their children about healthy relationships, bullying, and sexual harassment. I really like this presentation because we, as much as possible, try to do it in partnership with the school, a school administrative or a principal. And then mental health, sexual exploitation, and gender. And gender is really the only presentation on this list that is more like us teaching. Like we're talking about where gender is, like the terms that young people are using, how to be supportive, how to raise an ally, things like that. And I will put my email in the chat if you want more information. I see a lot of people are in schools that we're already working with and or in our service area. So please feel free to reach out as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Khadijah. And just briefly, I do see there's a question in the chat here. This was a while back, so apologies, but I think it could relate to this program in particular, but also some of the other work that the Annex is doing. There was somebody who was asking, just curious how that's received by parents, this kind of work you all are doing.
Okay, I think I did see that, and maybe it was like specifically referring to pregnancy testing and Plan B, I believe. If I'm incorrect, please write in the chat and correct me. So there was notification at those two high schools that this was a service that the annex will be providing. There was like one parent that had an issue with that. And, you know, we really respect parents' autonomy to let us know if they don't want their young person accessing any of the services that we provide. They have that right. But other than that, I think parents understand that, like, this, I think some parents say, like, this is the world we live in now, right? And like young people need access to this because if they're able to prevent pregnancies, then they're able to achieve their goals. If they're able to understand or know when they're pregnant, they're able to make decisions that are best for their life. So it's really in partnership with the school. And I think there was a question about the nurse. The nurses are really supportive with the work that we do, but they're like, we'll let the annex do that. We don't want to do that. And it's like, that's fine. Like, we're more than happy to take that on.
Awesome. Thank you, Khadijah. Just recognizing time, I am just going to breeze through our last couple of slides here. And again, all of this information is available on the Change to Chill website. But just in the way of other resources that are available to you all as supportive adults in the lives of youth, we do have this tip sheet that was created in partnership with Youth Directly about tips about how to talk to them about stress and mental well-being. So generally a handout that we'll provide to school staff is just one thing to get you started in thinking about how to engage youth specifically in these kinds of conversations, and from teens themselves, things that are helpful and things that are not helpful. So one thing to look out for. For those of you who are classroom teachers in the room, we do have a lot of lessons on the Change to Chill website. These are the 6 that we currently have, and there will be more that I think that we will be looking into the next year or so, you know, more aligned, I think, with social and emotional learning. We recognize that that's work that many of you are already doing in your school communities, and so we just want to provide another area to support those efforts that you're already engaging in, right? So currently the lessons that we have available on the website are related to mindfulness, life balance, guided imagery, for example. So if you're looking for kind of a tangible way and some activities to engage your students in the classroom in many of these different concepts, this may be a good go-to resource for you. And then on this page, that's sort of what each lesson plan page looks like. We have got on the left there the PDF printout, and then on the right, just the drop downs of everything that you need. So try to make it pretty easily accessible. There's also the stress factor quiz. This is our primary interactive content as well. So again, something that could be helpful for your students to take as they start to think about kind of their different experiences with stress and mental health, but also something that you all could do as a staff, for example, just as a way to get the conversation started. So just one interactive piece there. So other good go-to pages on our website. So this is our activities and tools page, which is really the hub of where all of our lessons, all of our handouts, all of our worksheets, all of our audio meditations really live. So if you're looking for anything related to a worksheet or a handout that you might want to do or give to one of your students, or even reference to a parent or other caregiver, that all lives on this page of the website. And then over the years, Change to Chill has amassed a huge video library. And it'll tell you on the page if it's 2 to 4 minutes or less than a minute, etc. So this might be another way to start to introduce conversations about mental health and well-being with your students, just playing a quick video in a class, for example. Also, we utilize videos a lot in terms of our communication. So this is something that could be shared with parents and families, also played at a staff meeting, for example, again, primarily as just a way to get the conversation started. So lots of those available to you as well. Also just want to point quickly to what we call chill breaks. So again, for you classroom teachers, this might be one place to go as you're thinking about how to incorporate some mindful movement or some meditation, for example, into your time in the classroom. So a good go-to for that. And then again, I think these are also things that could be incorporated for staff as well. So I know, for example, on my team, one thing that we start our meetings with is 3 good things, right? Which is something that we talk about on the website. So just as a way to kind of get us into a positive mindset before we get into the business of the day, and just recognizing that these are things that are helpful for youth, but could also be helpful for adults as well. And then the last plug that I'll make for you here, if you want to stay in touch with Change to Chill and everything that we've got going on, we do have, it's a monthly newsletter. Apologies for that typo there, but just something to keep an eye out for to stay up to date with everything that we've got going on. And then super quickly, I wanted to make a plug for our other two sister initiatives that we have at Allina Health. The first is Health Powered Kids. So this is really focused on youth ages 5 to 10-ish. We're doing a little bit of work on revamping this program currently. Right now, the focus of this program is in the areas of physical health and well-being, active living, healthy eating. There's also a little bit on some hygiene and sanitation, so hand washing, for example, and then more and more moving into the mental health and well-being space for this program too. And then also our other sister initiative, which is called Hello for Health. So this is our focus here is on social connections, primarily for older adults. So recognizing that social connectedness is also essential to our mental health and well-being. And so how do we do that as adults as well? So that's everything that I have. I know that that was a lot, especially in the last couple of minutes here, but I do just want to open it up to anybody who might want to ask any questions. And I know Kathy too, you wanted to do a bit of wrap up as well.
Sure, I'll just jump in quick, and if people have questions, we'll answer those. But thank you to Sydney and Khadija for their time today and just kind of sharing an overview of some of the new exciting kind of cultural resources that are coming to Change to Chill for youth as well as for school staff to use with them. We will be sending out the recording and also the PowerPoint slide. And also ask for an evaluation for your feedback. NSCU will also be coming in an email, probably have that out on Monday. Also, there are a couple of people online that Hennepin County is running a pilot program with around some kind of calm corners, and I'll be sending out an email with more information on that as well the week of the 5th. Sydney has added the survey link for your response of just evaluating what you learned today. We appreciate if you could fill it out. It's rather short and it's quick just to answer and give us some feedback. But other questions, feel free to come off mic or put it into the chat section.
And that's okay too. Yep. I know that Khadija put her contact information in the chat. I will put mine as well, and that will also be included in the slides that we send out. But thank you all so much for your time today. If there's ever anything that you need or have questions about related to Change to Chill, please feel free to reach out at any point in time. But just wanted to give another thank you to Khadija for co-presenting with me today and for being an ongoing amazing community partner. So thank you all so much for your time, and we hope to be in contact with you soon.